Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the first half of my fantasy running back rankings. That is 1 to 12. In this segment here, we are going to finish off my running back rankings, going over 13 to 24, getting through that RB2 area. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. In this segment, though, we are going to finish up our running back rankings. As we see here, we just went over 1 through 12. Breece Hall down to Devon Achane. We are starting at number 13 with new Packers running back Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is a guy that just 2 years ago was the overall RB1. He's a guy that goes through hot and cold seasons, so this might be a season for him to be a hot name. But I don't feel like the Packers are very good at getting their running backs, especially non-pass catching running backs, to the top. Josh Jacobs is a guy that is supremely talented on the ground. He's still young. You go back just one season ago, he was awesome. Again, best fantasy running back in the entire league. But he's inconsistent. He comes from the Raiders over to Green Bay. I have my gripes with Green Bay's decision to move on from Aaron Jones, who we'll talk about later. His pass catching isn't at the same level that Aaron Jones was, and that's where Aaron Jones got a lot of extra value from. Josh Jacobs isn't getting those extra catches, which is why he falls just outside of that top 12 range for me. At 14, I have Joe Mixon. And Joe Mixon is a guy that I personally have never really been too high on, but last year he finished as the RB6, got a lot more volume than I expected him to get. He enters a Houston Texans offense that let Devin Singletary rush for almost 900 yards last year. He is better than Devin Singletary. He should hit 1,000. Again, doesn't quite make that RB1 cut because he doesn't have that receiving upside. Everyone in the RB1 cut, with the exceptions of Isaiah Pacheco and Derrick Henry, really have that receiving upside that gives them that extra boost. But Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, they fall just outside because they do not have that. At 15, similar situation to these other two. David Montgomery. David Montgomery might surprise a lot of people, finished as the overall RB9 last season. He was a touchdown machine, finishing up at the goal line. He was the Lions' goal line back. He was also kind of the lead back. Jahmyr Gibbs, as far as an actual football player, took a backup role to David Montgomery. And what we've seen in the preseason and what we've seen from Lions camp doesn't really show that we expect it to change much. Again, Jahmyr Gibbs should improve, which means we see a little bit of a drop-off from David Montgomery. But I've seen David Montgomery go back as far as the 10th round-ish. That's way too far back for him. That's great value if you can get David Montgomery back there. He's a guy that I love, solidly up in that RB2 range, should be a steal for a lot of drafts. At 16, Aaron Jones, and he's kind of going in a similar range to David Montgomery, maybe even a lot further back, about 20 picks back, I guess. Aaron Jones is a guy that I personally love. Aaron Jones, I love his ability. He might be a top 3 pass-catching running back. It's hard to overstate his pass-catching abilities, but you don't see a lot of running backs catching over-the-shoulder balls, running down the sideline on go balls, right? That's not something you see a lot of running backs do, but that's something that Aaron Jones has in his skill set. That's something that he has. If he can stay healthy, Minnesota should be a good spot for him. That is a very talented offense. The offensive line is good enough. It's not really too big of a downgrade or upgrade from Green Bay. The quarterback situation's a little more iffy, but he should benefit from that, getting a lot of checkdowns and dump-offs. Again, his explosiveness, if he can stay healthy, he should be a great pick. I have him at 16. At number 17, I've got Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert, who again finished as the overall RB2 last season, I think he's going to take a little bit more of a backseat, not just because he's a little bit older, but also because Devon Achane is going to be healthier, I believe, and should take a bunch more carries away from Raheem Mostert. That doesn't mean he's not going to be good. He's still draftable. He's another one of these guys that's falling way back. ESPN has him rated as like the RB30, which again, way too low in my books. He should absolutely be, he should absolutely finish as a top 20 running back. He's not just going to fall off the face of the earth. He's going to take a dip, but he's not going to disappear. Raheem Mostert should be on your draft boards, especially if you can get him much later in the draft. At 18, I have Kenneth Walker. Kenny Walker is an explosive back. He does his thing. He's not flashy, right? He isn't going to score 45 points in a week, right? But he's a guy that's going to be consistent. He's a guy that's going to give you 12, 13, 14 points a week, maybe a touchdown in there as well. This is a guy that you can put in as a RB2, high-end RB3, and you should be confident with it. He's a guy that you can kind of set and forget about. The Seahawks are going to run the ball a lot. This is going to be good for them. I really like Kenny Walker this year. And along the same veins, my 19th running back is James Conner. And a lot of people might say, why James Conner so high? James Conner is another guy that I think is being very undervalued this year. You look at the Cardinals offense once Kyler Murray came back into the fold at the end of last season, they were so much better. Kyler Murray was able to power this offense, but even without him, overall, if you go by average fantasy points per games, James Conner finished 7th. He didn't finish in total points 7th, but in average per game, he was 7th. He had 5 yards per carry, which is really, really good. He's just been the picture of consistency at the running back position, and I don't really expect that to change. The offensive line got better. The receiving weapons got better. The quarterback situation for the whole season is going to get better. James Conner is a really good late round draft steal, I think. He's not going to be your RB1, but if you can grab him as your RB2, especially for value in some of these later rounds, he is absolutely worth taking that pick on. At number 20, Alvin Kamara. And this is kind of the opposite story. A lot of people have Alvin Kamara a lot higher up, especially with that pass catching upside. But he was atrocious last year on the ground. He had 3.9 yards per carry, by far his worst. 649 yards, worst of his career. He's not getting any younger. He continues to get worse as the offensive line gets worse. He's lost a lot of his elusiveness as he got older. Where he really thrived last season, and the reason he had many fantasy points is because Derek Carr threw him like 15 balls a game. I don't expect that to happen again. Again, that is not sustainable production. You can't look at a guy and be like, all right, you're going to get me 15 carries, 30 yards, 12 catches for 20 yards. That's basically what he was doing. Maybe he sprinkled in a touchdown or two, right? This is not a guy you can count on every week in, week out for fantasy, unless he's getting an insane amount of catches and targets, unless he's getting an insane amount of touchdowns. And I just don't see that out of Alvin Kamara this year in the Saints. I think they're going to try and do something else, focus a little more on a guy like Chris Olave, try and develop the wide receivers, a little slow down on the dump downs to Alvin Kamara. But I could be way off on that. He could catch 15 balls a game, and that could be something. I still think he drafted a little bit too high, though. At 21, Ramondre Stevenson. Another guy that's going to get all the carries, all the touches. A bad offense, he's going to be something they rely on. It's a bad offensive line, though, so he's not too high. I love Ramondre. I think he's a really talented runner. The backup is Antonio Gibson. Ramondre does have the ability to catch this. I think they forgot how to use him last season. Again, they didn't have offensive coordinators, but this is a guy that can do it all, has shown the ability to be a workhorse back. He's worth a flyer. He's not a guy that's going to be a league winner, I think, just because of how atrocious the offense is going to be. But he's worth a flyer, I think, in the later round. Then we get to Zamir White. Zamir White at 22. Zamir White is a rookie or not a rookie. He was a rookie last season. He comes in. He's now the lead back in Vegas. A lot of people are high on him. I'm a little lower on him just because we haven't seen him do it at the NFL level. I think he has the ability to explode, but sitting here at 22, I just don't have the biggest amount of faith in him. And the same thing with Rachaad White. He's a guy that kind of was like Travis Etienne, although he didn't have as many of those big weeks. He finishes the running back 8 overall, but when you look at his averages, especially down the stretch of the season, he had a lot of really poor performances. He was a little bit touchdown dependent, and I'm not trusting him to repeat his success from last season again. He's down at 23. And 24, rounding out my top 24, is Javonte Williams. I think he's a guy that could potentially be really good. He finished in the top 12 of running backs when he was splitting with Melvin Gordon. He looked like he was primed to take that next step. He's officially 2 years back from an ACL injury. He should be all the way back. Sean Payton and a good offensive line, along with Bo Nix, who is going to settle for a lot of checkdowns. They're going to run the ball a lot. We've had the same kind of dilemma with him before last season, which is why he's down at 24. But I personally believe in him. I think he can be really good. Now we get to our honorable mentions. These guys are down here because I'm not sure what's going to happen with their quarterback situation or, injuries. Nick Chubb is my first honorable mention. He's a guy I think should be able to bounce back. He's missing 4 weeks, though, so that's going to push him a little bit back outside of the top 24. The Browns love to run the ball, though, and if he's able to return to even like 3/4 of his form from when he was really doing his thing, this is a guy that should be easily RB1 average. Now, I don't know if he'll get all the way up there, though, but you can get him in double-digit rounds. He's worth pulling the trigger on if you already have a couple of solid running backs. I also have the Steelers running back pairs. Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris. Those two guys, I wonder how well that offense is going to go. I made this list before the Steelers officially announced their quarterback. They're sitting in my honorable mentions. They could each have a breakout season. Jalen Warren starts injured, but both of these guys should run the ball a lot. Should get a lot of chances to run the ball in that Pittsburgh offense. So we'll see what they can do. I think they'll both have startable seasons. And my final honorable mention is DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift joins the Bears in an offense that I think is going to be very air heavy, very pass oriented. I think he's not going to get as many touches. I also don't love his running style. He likes to go east and west a lot. I think he needs to go north and south, just a little bit more. But I do like DeAndre Swift. I think he's very good. He could sneak into this top 24 list. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who was I way off on? Who did I nail? Who do you think should be on this list that I completely forgot about? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Throw it in the comments. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we are going to take a stop into the world of baseball. We're going to talk a little bit about the AL Central, a race that seemed like it was all but over, but last night it renewed once again. We've talked about this a little bit, where the Royals, the Twins, the Guardians are neck and neck. The Royals finally caught up to the Guardians. It's going to be a race to the finish. We will talk about that in the next segment, so stick around. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.